What is the Old Testament law?
All right. So most often when people say law, they're using it in like a kind of the sorry. Most often when people...
Oh, boy. My life later is going to be so full of cut tools.
I'm so sorry. All right. So, so most often when people refer to the law, they're referring to Torah.
Okay.
So that's the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So
all law.
Genesis through those first 5 books, that's what they are referred to as the law or Torah. But then law is also used to speak specifically about the commandments and the instructions that were given to Moses on Mount Sinai.
10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for example, the 10 Commandments.
Oh, wait. So God wrote more than just the 10 Commandments on rocks on Mount Sinai?
So we've got 10 Commandments, right? Uh-huh. But then he goes on to give about, I think it's 613 other instructions. Yeah. Oh. So this law was part of the covenant that God...
Hope Moses brought a lunch.
Well, man, he was up there for a minute.
Okay.
Remember? Because, he was up there for a minute because not only was
they
God...
had enough time to make a
golden calf.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. And they thought Moses was never coming back or something, so they decided to make a golden calf. But anyway, so the law was part of the covenant that God was making with Israel.
Okay.
And so think of it as the terms and the conditions of the covenant. So if Israel followed the laws, they were blessed. If they did not follow the laws, they were cursed. Okay. So pretty straightforward in that sense.
So instantly cursed because they made that statue.
Yeah. And there was actually death came from that. Yeah. For those that were participated. So
cool.
So the law includes the instructions for how the Israelites were to love God and to love others. For example, like you said, the 10 Commandments. Now, you can take the 10 Commandments and you can pretty much divide that up and go, okay, first few laws deal with loving God. The last several deal with loving others.
Okay.
And then it's got laws for the priesthood and for the tabernacle. So things that were included in that were like, what priest had to wear, like the actual, like the dress they had to wear, and then like the activities that they had to do in the tabernacle. It included sacrifices as like acts of worship, but then also sacrifices for sin.
Of people?
No people being sacrificed under these laws. And then laws for how the people of Israel were to remain holy and to remain clean, so that they could partake in the ceremonial worship of God there in the tabernacle. And then there's also the civil laws of, what should be done when people actually break the laws. And so there's, the stated consequences for things. So that's the, kind of a summation of the things that are included in the law. And ultimately these laws were, helping Israel to love God and love others, but it was also like making a distinction between them and the rest of the nations that were around them.
Okay.
And so when they were to go into the promised land, because of the way they acted, the way they conducted themselves, the laws that they followed would make them distinct from the people groups around them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all in Leviticus.
So that's in Exodus, that's in Leviticus, and then it's retold or reaffirmed in Deuteronomy.
Okay. What's Numbers?
Numbers is not the retelling, but the telling of what happened while Israel was moving to the promised land. And then you remember they sent the spies in there, and 10 of the spies, 10 out of the 12 spies came back and were like, hey, we do not need to go into the promised land. It's going to be bad for us. It's not going to be good for us. And so they made the decision to not go into the promised land at that point, because the 10 spies that came back were saying, yeah, the land is great, but the people there are like giants. They're going to kill us all.
Oh, right.
We can't go in. And so they decided not to go. So they basically disobeyed God by not going in. So then God calls them to wander around the wilderness for 40 years, and that's recorded in Numbers. And then you come up into Deuteronomy, the generation has died out that was part of that original generation that said, no, we don't want to go into the promised land. And so now they're in Deuteronomy, they're back up on the edge again of the border, looking into Canaan and
going, we should probably go in this time.
Yeah. And Moses is kind of passing the baton to Joshua because Joshua is going to be the one to lead them in. But Moses basically recounts the covenant and the laws to them, and for them to agree of, hey, this is how we need to act, behave, so that we are separated and made distinct between all the other people groups that will be there in the land. So